Hey everyone, this is GKCS. Today we find ourselves with a new video on individual contribution versus a managerial role. So we're going to be talking about the competencies, we're going to be talking about the way that these two roles are evaluated. A small disclaimer before we start, none of these competencies are exclusive to one career path. It's not that technical knowledge is not needed for a manager. But on a scale of 0 to 10, you'll probably rate influence here to be more important than here. With that, let us start. Okay, so the first thing that we'll be looking at is how do you actually evaluate a good individual contributor or a good manager. So what would be a good individual contributor would be based on certain metrics. What would those metrics look like? Let's say that all of your engineers currently are spending 3 hours per week on testing. So why are they doing that? Because the build time of testing is too much. So when you create a build, it takes you about 5 minutes per build. This is a problem across your team, and what they're doing right now is they are using haphazard tools or they are using their own custom solutions to get around the build time. So as a senior engineer, you may come up with a method or a tool which helps reduce the amount of testing time in your entire company. That could be hundreds of engineering hours for 1 year. On the other hand, you have the manager. The manager is evaluated on the team performance. If they create some sort of a product which has helped the entire organization, all of this is great, and you should take all the credit that you have and distribute it amongst the engineers, because when they are talking, whatever they're doing, everyone is thinking, who's this guy's manager? Oh, that's that smart person who's enabled them to do well. Okay, so your team performance is literally your performance. The impact that the team members made versus the opportunities that you picked up for them is how you're going to be evaluated. The next thing is, what is the day in the life of an individual contributor, especially a senior individual contributor. We have spoken about this more in a previous YouTube video. The day in your life is mostly spent on these three things: either gathering more knowledge technically, implementing your solutions, or gathering requirements for the engineering products that you're creating. As for the manager, you have a day which is much more varied. Let's look into this. The first one is influence. So your primary job is to ask people to work on certain things, okay? Create impact in the company. So how do you do that? Well, money is one way, of course, and also you have a certain authority as a manager to just ask people to do something. But usually you expect the manager is going to do a few other things to have influence. The first one is have very high integrity, which means the team can depend on you in situations where they're not very sure whether they should do the right thing or the easy thing. Okay, as a manager, you have very high integrity standards, the highest level of ethics. If there is a product which is not yet ready, you're not going to fake it. You're going to say, I'm sorry, the product is not ready. We are going to push the date by 3 more days. If someone is not well, then you're going to protect them. And so in this way, you are going to have the highest level of ethics, the highest level of integrity that you can have. That will bring you influence. Your team respects such people, they want to be like such people. It's great. Transparency is also quite important in a team. This again brings in influence. If you can say that this is the reality, I have nothing to do with it, like it's not my personal choice, it's what is happening, it takes away a lot of the concerns that the team has around some bias you may have, or some decisions which you are making which don't make sense to them from the outside. So the more transparency you can bring into the team, the better it is. Be careful that you don't bring in all the details of your day-to-day life in front of them, because that doesn't help them. You are abstracting out the complexities as much as you can, but you're also bringing transparency where it is relevant. You also have fairness, which we covered a little bit in integrity, but the basic idea is in the team, you're not going to have bias towards one person. You're going to give opportunities to everybody, and you're not going to have favoritism. Okay, this is much harder than it looks, because eventually you end up creating an image for everybody in the team as a manager. So to bring this fairness into a process is much harder than it looks, but it can be done. That's your job to increase your influence. If there is fairness and everyone perceives you as a fair manager, they're likely to work harder and work on things that you believe are important. And the most important part by far, I think, for influence is a willingness to help your teammates succeed. You want each engineer in your team to do extremely well. You want them to do well at work, you want them to do well at life, you really like them. Okay, you are to some extent a parent figure. Okay, personal life you want to keep away from it, but when it comes to professional growth, yes, you are a parent figure, you want them to grow. And if you have this kind of a mindset, what happens is when a person asks you to either switch roles or work on an interesting project or may need some guidance or motivation for any project, you explain to them why this is good for them. And if you have high integrity, then you're going to do that in an honest way. You're not going to try to manipulate them, you're actually going to try to help them at every step of the way. So that's number one. Number two is handling uncertainty. This is interesting. As a manager, you're living with uncertainty every day. You're going to be getting comfortable with the fact that you don't know everything. Okay, like I said, this is also partly also a thing of individual contributors, but for a manager it's much more, because you're dealing with people and you're dealing with situations which change, you're dealing with requirements which change, you're dealing with people who change. So one term which is quite interesting is VUCA. VUCA is volatility, that is V. U is uncertainty, C is complexity, and A is ambiguity. Okay, each of these terms you can have a look in the description. The basic idea being that you're not sure whether the project which is on today is going to be there tomorrow, volatile. You're not really sure what is the payback from this project. Is it going to be very good or is it going to be like nothing? So that's uncertainty. Complexity means that you're not sure if this project is touching other components, if there are other things depending on it. So that would be a complex project. And ambiguity would be that you're not really sure what the requirements of this project is. You're not sure whether you have to go at a particular depth or you have to go at a very superficial level. Each of these can have strategic solutions. You can, let's say for complexity, one of the things you can do is you need to document the things that you're doing when multiple components of the project may be affecting each other, and you also want to talk to different team members before you start the project. Okay. But yes, each of these has a strategic decision. You as a manager are expected to look into it. Part number C, I think most of you are already thinking, oh my God, managers must be gods by now, but with practice, I think they get really well at this. Part C is people. People involves processes, so hiring people, helping them grow, so that would be onboarding, appraisals, leaves. What you want to do is you don't want to do this every time ad hoc. You want to set up processes so that you can take feedback, you can give them the right feedback also. In that way, the people who are working for you have a good environment to work. They are as efficient as they possibly can be. The other thing is, where do you work? So for an individual contributor, eventually as you get more senior, you're expected to solve problems which are important across teams. So there is a horizontal impact that you have. Multiple teams might be impacted by the same work that you do. Like we said, the logging problem or the testing problem may impact multiple teams. For a manager, it's much more a one team thing. It's a vertical which gets impacted by you. Even if there are multiple teams that are getting impacted, it's usually in the same vertical, because you are closer to the business side here and you're closer to the tech or engineering side over here. Finally, competencies. What kind of competencies are important for an individual contributor? This varies from level to level, and we have created a detailed YouTube video for this, so do have a look. It's quite useful, quite nice. As for a manager, this also depends level to level, of course, but 4 of the things which are common across all levels are: 1, task management. Here you take different tasks, you are able to break those tasks down, you have some sort of priority setting here, you estimate how much time is going to be taken per task and how important is the task, so that's priority and estimations, and then you're able to measure the performance, which helps you set the right processes later. Number 2 is presence. If there is a high value project or if there is a project with a short deadline, you are expected to be there all the time. You're expected to come every day. An individual contributor is also expected to come every day, or be there when things are on fire. But for a manager, of course, you are expected to lead the team, lead from the front, stay where the problems are, help your team as much as you possibly can. So presence is super important. Ownership: if things go wrong, it's your fault. If things go right, it's your team which did it. Of course, deep down, it is you who did it, as long as your team, actually performed the things that were expected. Ownership also means that you're going to look at a product not as something that needs to be done, but something that is yours. So you're going to do it the best way that you possibly can, and you're going to look for scope of improvement. Okay, it's a different perspective. The manager is looking at their team or the products that they're creating as a customer or as a person who's selling the product. Finally, team health needs to be monitored. As a manager, it's your responsibility to know how well your team is functioning. One of them could be motivation. You are not very sure what is the impact of this project. This does not necessarily mean speeches, but it does mean that you need to talk to individual members and tell them what is the impact of each of their projects, and also how this will help them in their own personal lives, in their career, okay, professional growth. The second thing is team strength. This is something interesting. You have to note how much team strength you have versus what kind of opportunities you have picked up. And then you have to measure the impact that you can make based on the promises you have made. So if you need more people, then you need to account for that. And literally sometimes you'll go to the accounts team and say, I need more cash, or the finance team and say, I need more cash, I need to hire more people. If you have too much team strength, then you want to allocate them to different teams, possibly, or you want to go and pick up more opportunities. Finally comes risks. Risks is covered to a large extent in people, but one thing I would like to highlight here is the problem of a single point of failure. As a manager, you want to make sure that your team does not have problems which cannot be fixed. If someone falls sick one day and you have a production issue which only they know about or they are able to resolve, then your team is in trouble. So what you want to do is you want to reduce risks as much as possible. This is one type of risk. Another type of risk may be that you give somebody a project and you're not sure whether they'll take it to completion. So one person handling the project may not be enough. You might want someone monitoring them. Now, a lot of this, like I said, is covered in processes and best practices, but risks is something you have to keep in mind when you're looking at the team health. You want to minimize or at least manage risks as much as you possibly can. So that's what we have for individual contributor versus manager comparison chart. Do let me know if you have any doubts or if you have any feedback around this. It may be that you have worked on this path for a much longer time, and I would love to hear your comments. This has been gathered by speaking to managers more than me doing the management. I have been working on a startup for a few years now, but there's a lot of you who are watching who have worked as a manager for decades possibly. So thank you for watching firstly, and do let me know. See you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.